What is up, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube? Today we're going to be doing a World of Warcraft speculation slash lore video where we're going to be talking about G'huun. More specifically, how was this beautiful worm looking chubby wubby whatever the hell it is thing was created, how it works, and like what sort of powers it has, and why does it matter in World of Warcraft that this thing is created, and what sort of implications does that mean for when it comes to the Titans. So without further ado, let's dive in. When first diving into sort of G'huun, you need to first kind of understand some of the powers and things that he has, or it, I guess, so to speak, because obviously I don't think it has technically a gender. But one of the things that is noticeable is obviously its reanimating of the dead. As you guys can see here, you can definitely reanimate the dead and cause things like these abominations to be made. Another thing that's important to also keep in mind is devotion and sacrifice. G'huun seems to be very much about sacrificing things, giving it blood, giving it things to corrupt. It treats itself almost like a disease. Like it wants to corrupt and sort of, manipulate everything it touches. And you can actually figure this out when you look at the dungeon journal here. And if we are to read it, in Old War, the Titans hoped to find a solution to the old gods. But when they experimented on the old gods' unending and ravenous need to corrupt, they unexpectedly created a perfect avatar of that desire. G'huun is nothing but rot, pestilence, decay, an ultimate parasite, who cannot stop himself from consuming his host until it's gone. Okay, so I guess it is technically a he. Who would have guessed? So basically, it says that it's like a parasite, which I find rather interesting, because obviously, everybody kind of thinks of void and death in like sort of the same category, but how it says here is rather interesting. And keep in mind that the old gods were the ones that kind of put the curse of flesh on everything. More often, it is kind of given credit to the good old, if I just go here real quick, good old Yogg-Saron. He's known as the one that oftentimes is kind of given the credit of the curse of flesh. He's kind of the guy that mainly orchestrated it. And I think it's really interesting to actually dive into the curse of flesh because we get to kind of figure out more about what the Titans thought about it. So we know that the curse of flesh was this thing that caused people to have, flesh. The stone beings that the Titans once created now had flesh. That's why you see dwarves, that's why you see gnomes, that's why you see a lot of the different creatures over time eventually become that. Ettins coming from the giants, what have you. So I think that's really interesting to actually kind of look into because it makes things that are technically immortal also mortal. And I think that's one of the reasons why the Titans were kind of experimenting on the old gods, is trying to figure out a way to stop the curse of flesh. But there's a lot more to this, and let's dive into that. So let's talk about creation. Creation is actually pretty interesting, and you might be saying, why are you at Wyrmtest Temple? Well, there's actually a really interesting thing that not many people will know, and for you guys watching this video, you guys can actually brag to your friends a little bit. So there's this wonderful thing called the Path of the Titans. The Path of the Titans is basically the path that the Titans and the Titan Keepers took to establish their sort of bases when fighting against the Black Empire. A lot of people don't know that. And I think it's really interesting because a lot of people don't actually know that you can use this to kind of help yourself find where all the Titan facilities are. So, for example, if you follow the Path of the Titans all the way up to Crystal Song, all the way up to Storm Peaks, and if you go your way casually on down through Dragonblight, keep in mind this all used to be a giant continent back in the day before the Well of Eternity kind of split and kind of tore apart the world. But if you were to actually follow that down, you would have gone to Stormheim. Then from Stormheim, you would have went down to the Broken Isles and where the Well of Eternity was, and then from there you would have went down to Nazmir. So this is also something that's very interesting to take a look at. And also, if you kind of were to follow that down, also Pandaria would have been right around the corner with its area of the Isle of Thunder. Now, the Isle of Thunder could be complicated, but if you were to kind of move it up and kind of jam it together with Zandalar, it actually makes a hell of a lot more sense than you would think. So, Why am I at the Path of the Titans? Why am I telling you about this? Because from this we can actually see the beautiful story of how this started. So with the creation of sort of this creature, we have to figure out where, one, it could be made, two, where did its essence come from, and three, where was it stored? Well, obviously we know it's stored here in Nazmir. So obviously they're going to create something somewhere, but they need to have somewhere that they created it to make it move very fast. So that is where Pandaria comes into play with the Isle of Thunder. Now, what's really interesting about the Isle of Thunder that a lot of people don't take into mind is that it is one of the few areas that were actually used by the Titans to test out things and create living beings. So if you actually go over here to the Isle of Thunder, you guys will also remember the Dark Animus. Basically, the Dark Animus is sort of these sort of flesh-shaping experiments that were done by the Titans, which then the Mogu eventually did as well. As the Mogu got the Curse of Flesh, they learned to sort of manipulate the flesh and things out there. But don't you find it interesting that the Titans, who don't really mess with flesh, have a flesh-shaping machine that help them make things like the Sirach, for example? Well, think no further, because if you look at the Sirach, he has infections and things going on about him. There's definitely some slight old gods things going on within here. And if you actually look into it, it makes sense that this facility was used to make G'huun. That's why you see a lot of the bloods, that's why you see a lot of the weird like infections and everything. It's because it was used literally to make G'huun. Now, obviously, some of the things within sort of the raid will show you a little bit otherwise, but if you actually kind of dive in, you'll see that it was probably made in Pandaria. Some of the things were kind of experimented on. They brought that over to make G'huun. So, pretty nice little fun fact so that you guys can learn there. Now, if we actually continue before that Path of the Titans area, so before it goes into Nazmir, before it goes there, it would have been around the Well of Eternity. However, I don't think that it actually uses what you think. I don't think it actually uses Y'Shaarj. I think what they instead used was from the good old blood of Yogg-Saron, because I think they learned about the Curse of Flesh. I think the Curse of Flesh was something that they really wanted to learn about, and they wanted to learn how it infects, like a disease, and they quarantined him, and then they tried to experiment to kind of do subtle doses to figure out how the hell do you solve this problem. So I think, in fact, that maybe they sort of stored him here, took the blood down, and then sort of used it down there. Or that it's N'Zoth's blood. Because if you actually look in the raid, there's a lot of N'Zoth-like creatures. We've got this, which is the plague corrupted countless of trolls and began its terrifying periods in Zandalar history. These constructs within Ulduar studied the disease in search of a cure, and found that only isolation and extermination was effective. Unfortunately, the facility's safeguards have cracked apart, and the plague has accidentally combined with a sample of G'huun's blood. So, that's something to keep in mind there too. There's a lot of different like blood things that kind of go about on. So one of the things that's also cool is you've got now, sort of N'Zoth here, and his sort of creatures as well. You've got Talik. And one of the things that's very interesting as well when actually looking at these guys in here is a lot of the sort of keepers in there seem very basic. It almost seems like this wasn't a big facility. This is just more of a quick little experiment on the side, nothing really big. So I think it's going to be really interesting there. But yeah, Pandaria was where exactly the sort of G'huun was probably created, or was first created, or was the first idea where they sort of manipulated the flesh to try to figure out how to deal with the Curse of Flesh. Pretty interesting read to look into that. So in conclusion, what do I think? I think that it's actually a very interesting story, but just to make it very fast, basically, if we go back to Wrath of the Lich King here, Yogg-Saron was starting to use the Curse of Flesh on the Titan Keepers stuff, and it scared them because they saw the Curse of Flesh, which could make something that is like immortal, like some of the workers and things that the Titans created, could now officially die. That gave them a big scare. Eventually they were able to lock up Yogg-Saron, but they needed to figure out a way to stop this sort of disease and corruption that happened with the Curse of Flesh. So what did they do? They built a facility in Pandaria to sort of manipulate the flesh, to sort of figure out ways of manipulating it to where they can create the same thing and kind of do little subtle experiments, since that Yagi Boy was now locked up in his nice little cage. So from there they started experimenting and sort of doing things to figure out how to do it. From there they were able to create a little creature here, and they transferred him over to Uldir. From Uldir they obviously were able to find out that this guy was too big, so they locked it up in a tight little prison, put some giant seals around it, and was like, okay, this is a quarantine zone, nobody enters, nobody leaves. And I think that's pretty much what ended up happening there. Now what is interesting is from there the old gods had to figure out more elaborate ways of doing things, and that's why they started building things like, for example, the Origination modules in multiple places like Ulduar and Halls of Origination, because they feared that the Curse of Flesh would have gone too far. So they built this place here as a way of doing that, and then they also built in Wrath of the Lich King another failsafe if that were to happen in Uldir, which is why Algalon comes in and he's like, holy crap, this place is corrupted like no other, and he wanted to do a Origination module. So that's one of the reasons there. And if you actually follow this, actually kind of makes a lot of sense, because if you go here into Pandaria, you can see that they built another Origination module here because of all the experiments that are going on. So if you actually put Kalmandor and Uldum and all that kind of all together into like one giant bunch, you can see that little path of where they had a failsafe here, and then they had the two places there. And then up in Northern, they had the main guy there, and then they had Origination module up there. They have Origination modules in every area on purpose. It's like when a disease kind of spreads out, you're able just to blow up the building, and it's like, okay, now it's gone. It's a way of purifying completely the sort of things going on. Now, I do think one of the things that's going to be interesting that I want to dive into as well is going to be, what is the difference between Death and Void? We see this very much with the Curse of Flesh and Death. Is there an actual difference? I'm going to be doing a video on that in the future as well. I'm also going to be doing a sort of a video of illustrating sort of the plan and the path of the Titans, and showing you guys where sort of the path is, and trying to draw a map of where it could be. And I think I might know where N'Zoth might be. But if you guys are actually interested in that, be sure to subscribe and like and comment. Also, I do a variety of other gaming stuff as well, so you guys are bound to find something that you like, a little bit of vlogs in between as well, just so you guys get to know them personally me. I also have an email down below that you guys can check out to send me questions and things. So for my future channel updates, we're going to be probably doing some Q&As as well. Anyways, I thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Stay baller, my friends.